Yeah, today's presentation is specifically going to be on clash automation and really unleashing that power and efficiency. So this is really going to help you guys streamline productivity. Some of the biggest things that because I've worked actually in construction quite a bit, is a lot of people just want to know how can we increase profit, basically the predictability and operational efficiency of the company. And this is really one of the best ways to actually get the most out of Revizto.
So I'm Jason, Chief Innovation Officer at Revizto. You might have seen me in the keynote, so I won't rabbit on too long.
My name is Matthew Ivers. I have 17 years of experience, 8 years in design and architecture. I am a licensed architect in California and Idaho, and then I did work 9 years prior to this, joining Revizto. In June 2023, I worked as a VDC manager, most recently at Suffolk Construction for 6 years. So I'll go ahead and walk through the agenda because there's a lot, like I said, packed into this presentation. Full disclosure, we're not going to get to the last section here, which I'm sure a lot of you would love to talk about with emerging technology and where Revizto kind of is in that workflow or how it indirectly impacts things like reality capture. But I do want to kind of get started with just setting up your project. Jason will walk you through search sets, which he kind of touched on in the keynote if you were there. And then I'm going to really go into a more of a deeper discussion on how to set up the clash test on just one test example using the advanced automation feature and kind of walk you through the entire workflow, what that looks like from start to finish. Jason will then go into issue automation and show you what the differences are between simple and advanced automation. And then I'll close with the issue management in within our issue tracker. And then I'm really excited to get to this section, so I will probably kind of breeze through this pretty briefly or quickly. But the rapid fire round will be tips and tricks. That's really not specifically related to clash automation, but Revizto in general. Just a lot of the cool tips and tricks that you can find in there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with workflows that hopefully maximize your efficiency at your firm. So getting started, obviously the first thing is to create the project and create a cloud project. You're going to import obviously the 3D models, any point clouds, the 2D drawings. Jason kind of touched on this morning. We're going to now have basically access to these Revizto templates that will really streamline your productivity because they're going to have a lot of that search sets, let's say, already standardized class tests that you can import directly into your Revizto project. You'll just download them from our Revizto workspace. And then once you get those mapped correctly, because you will have to remap those search sets to your models, then you can start to invite the rest of your project team. So this is just showing you really the best way to get the models into Revizto. So Revizto does a really good job aggregating a lot of different file formats, whether it's from Revit, AutoCAD, Tekla, if it's an RCP or a point cloud, you could bring it all in. What I'm showing is the different models. So you usually have a detailer or a engineer that will be in charge of that model, and they'll want to export that into Revizto. This is the best way to get it into Revizto because it allows more autonomy for the user if they want to update their model quickly, rather than relying on one massive federated model, which can really bottleneck the information from getting into Revizto. So if you can get your trade managers or the engineers to export separately, and then Revizto will federate it all together, as long as you have all your coordinates aligned, that is the best practice for federating. So these are some of the templates that Jason spoke about that we'll have that you can download from our Revizto workspace. So things like search set, we're going to have all the categories mapped to the authoring file, so you don't have to create them every time, and that'll save you a lot of time. A lot of the clash tests that you saw from the matrix, you can now import those directly into your clash detection. And then, of course, we have a lot of other templates that you can use, such as stamps, appearance templates, and property favorites. Okay, so in this slide, so before I get into the deep dive on how to set up your tests, it's really actually important that we take a step back and look at the bigger picture and think about not just the technology as a solution, but really strategies and planning. If you properly set up a good strategy, you're actually paving the way and the foundation for a really good workflow. To really invest the time in the strategy is actually really important. And then once you finesse your setup and get it to work correctly, the automation will pay massive dividends each time you run it. So what I'm showing you here is really thinking about your systems based on what I call the system priority structuring. You can look at clash strategies basically as a micro or a macro clash test using our simple versus advanced automation features. And the way I like to really think about it is, how do I want to set up my test before I actually set up the test? And the best way, and every company probably has something similar, but it's to think about breaking out the elements by system priority. So you can see at the bottom here, these systems will have priority over the systems here at the top. So when you look at that, that helps you formulate your strategy of how you're going to actually set up your test and how the clashes will actually get mapped or assigned when we use our issue automation. As you can see, above that is lighting, civil, landscape. You might actually have some electrical equipment or large conduit feeders that might, let's say, be an exception. So as you can see, electrical normally would be up here, but there could be exceptions to the rule, and you might want to create some search sets for some large equipment. And then you got your plumbing, gravity, your mechanical, your pressurized systems and fire mains, your electrical, low voltage, and fire. Another thing to note is when I think about setting up tests is I like to think about it as simply as possible, and I like selection A to have the priority. So I know that everything that's clashing with the selection in B automatically gets the assigned clash. So I'll let Jason talk about this. This would be a micro strategy as far as clash using his class matrix.
So in my past role prior to joining Revizto, we used to do a lot of micro clash detection. What we found when you run clash detection at a macro level, you just spend a lot of time sifting through the results of the clash. What I wanted to achieve with the team was a way that you could set up a framework, a schema that transcended all projects and could be transferable to all projects. But to achieve that across a multitude of project typologies, it was necessary to go to a more micro level of clash testing. So you had the diversity within the framework so it could be transportable. Mainly because each project has the same things in it. If you're operating at a detail level, an example would be gravity drainage. It needs gravity to get out, doesn't work going uphill. And it needs to take priority over certain other things. Maybe it needs to take priority over ductwork, which is quite large, but a little bit more flexible. So building out a larger clash test matrix like this one and really thinking hard and working through what is fixed, what is movable, what is constrained by outside force allows for a much more dynamic clash matrix that can then leverage the clash and issue automation in Revizto. So that's what this matrix is designed to do.
So this is just based off of this. This is a more, I would say, granular matrix, but you can see it's really looking at the categories and breaking it down. So that's what those templates that I was referring to that Jason's was talking about. It'll look for search sets based on category, and once you set those up and get them mapped to those authoring files, now you can start to create these more micro clash tests. So structural steel versus mechanical, very simple, straightforward, to the point. But these could be very specific workflows, or maybe you want to create a particular clash type test that might not work if you pack too many model files in it. So this, like an 1.5" clearance clash type, which you can create, might be very applicable on steel versus mechanical, as an example. So looking at this one, and again, this is actually referring back to that system priority structure pyramid that you saw earlier. Once you understand what those priorities are, and you might want to talk to your trades and get their buy-in too, because they obviously might have things that you might have missed. But just using a very easy example, you can see structure has priority over all these trades right here. You can see plumbing, gravity, for example, will have priority over all the systems in selection B, which is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, pressurized systems, and fire sprinklers. So what I was referring to in selection A is it's easy to think about. As long as you know selection A has the priority, everything in B will get assigned the clash stamp in the issue automation. So everything in B will basically be assigned to clash using our advanced logic. And you can kind of see here, it's in Revizto, it actually uses red and green. So red is always A, and then B is always green. That's the easiest way to set up the automation, in my opinion. So this is just a micro clash test. Again, very simple. This is a mechanical ducts or mechanical model versus plumbing pressurized. Plumbing pressurized would have less priority. So again, A would be mechanical, B would be plumbing pressurized. And it's really looking at proximity to really, I guess you could say, fine tune. A good use case for this actually would be in when you're in the later stages of construction coordination. You might want to really fine tune and make sure that those clashes are not looking too big, because you can adjust that proximity. But obviously, it'll increase the amount of groups. So you can see it does a pretty good job reducing the amount of clashes. Looks like about 400 down to about 128. Can't really read that, but it's a 68% clash reduction, which is really a way to make your job a lot more efficient. But it's also very specific. It's not going too grand in the scale because the proximity is set at 10 feet. And then these are just some of the examples of what I'm grouping it. And when you say group by, it's actually constraining the clash to make sure it's looking at a specific category first, a specific system, which is a property, the level it's on, and then the zone it's in. This is, again, another example. Structural steel versus mechanical. It's using a very simple automation. This would be more, again, more granular. It's just one model versus another. And you could see, again, the proximities at 10. You can adjust that to 25, but that's very granular. It's going to be a smaller area, and you're going to make sure those get closed. But you can see that reduced your clash count from, again, about 160 to about, looks like 54. I can't read that, but 58% reduction. Whereas a macro clash test, so I'm kind of getting you the idea of a micro test versus a macro test. A macro test would be something that's packing a lot more models in it. So you can see in this example, I got structural steel, which has higher priority than all my MEP systems. I can set that proximity and use the same property conditions up here to constrain that, but it's looking at a very large area of 100 feet versus 10 feet. You can see that I actually reduced my clash count by 90% because it's putting it into those groups. And why might this be helpful? Well, maybe it's really early in the design stage where you're just trying to get an idea of where the hot spots are. You don't necessarily need to fix everything. You just need to fix the bulk of the major issues.
Search sets. I firmly believe that search sets are the key to unlocking the power behind Revizto. The way I'd recommend that you set up your search sets is through this cascading methodology. Start with your big things first. The models that are actually coming into Revizto, if you create dedicated search sets for those models, it means that every other subsequent search set can cascade. So when you come around to changing your object property search sets for the next project, all you have to do is change the search sets for the model names and everything else updates. So your category search sets update automatically, your property search sets update automatically, and then your clash tests update automatically. And it makes it very easy to then scale Revizto across multiple projects. For those that might have been in the Warren Amani class this morning, you would have seen Anton talking about this strategy firsthand, and you would have seen that they're up around 460 projects now on Revizto for a very, very small team. There's only 8 or 9 people in that team, and they're already managing close to 500 projects. So when you start to lean into some of these methodologies of scaling what we have inside Revizto at a fundamental level, you can really supercharge and empower your team to do more with less. The category search sets are particularly good to work with. RevUP comes with predefined categories. Those categories are transportable over into the IFC world. So mapping and creating your search sets around these categories just really empower you to get a lot out of Revizto on any type of project. It doesn't matter if it's an infrastructure project, a vertical building project, healthcare project. You're working with ArchiCAD, you're working with Revit, you're working with Tekla. It can support all of them quite simply. This is a diagram of how they cascade together. So at the top, the model search sets really drive everything else, and then the subsequent search sets reference the one above it. And you can mix and match these search sets. There's a primary flow where you can do models into categories, categories into properties, and then all of them into clash tests. But depending on the type of project that you're working on, you might want to shortcut it and come down a tertiary workflow and go models directly into clash tests. So it's very flexible, very dynamic, and again, it just allows you to scale Revizto very, very quickly. In my previous role where we were transitioning from Navisworks to Revizto, I used the same cascading methodology in Navisworks. It used to take about a day and a half to set up a project, a large project in Navisworks. Doing the same thing in Revizto. Anyone have a guess how long it would take? That's good. Anyone else better? 10 minutes. Yeah, I got it down to less than 10 minutes. We used to play a game in Warranamani, who could do it the fastest, and I was always striving for number one. And yeah, less than 10 minutes. So setting them up, it's really simple. If you want to go and create these from scratch, just go to your Find Objects, Properties, pull that up. I start with the model search sets with the search everywhere. It's like an open category. You're just going to look everywhere in the Revizto environment and then just nominate the models. You can use wildcards and bits and pieces if you want a bit more flexibility in that space. But I like the idea that it was fixed to I guess the file name itself. Pro tip down here at the bottom, elements only. Make sure your search sets tick that box. Otherwise, you can search for the container object. You don't want to search for the container that the objects live in. You want to search for the elements themselves. Expanding on to the categories. So you can see here it's searching inside the services model at the top. So step one, search within search set. And it's now searching inside the services model. And then I'm specifying which categories that I want for this search set. So this is looking for pipe work. So it's the pipe accessories, pipe fittings, pipes. I often exclude pipe installation. I often exclude flexible pipe work. By not putting it in the search set in the beginning, it means you don't have to process that information. So it speeds up the clash process inside Revizto. If you leave those things inside your search set, Revizto is going to have to process all those elements in the clash process, which takes time. So if you're just going to ignore them, don't include them inside the search set. Then taking it one step further, this is searching for hydraulic pipe work inside that. So you can see at the top, it's referencing the category search set. So they're cascading between themselves, and then it's looking for a specific parameter, the system type. In this example, HY for hydraulics, and that allows you to get that kind of granular clash results depending on whether it's a system type, a category within the project or the model itself. And then to build the clash test, just grab the search sets that you want. Again, I would always set the clash test to be everywhere at that kind of overall level, and then all of the specific searching inside the nested sets takes place, and then you can mix and match them. In this example here, we're pulling out the drainage pipe work, and then everything not less than 50 millimeters. So looking for the big stuff versus the small stuff, and then running different clash results, different clash priorities on those things.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the clash setup. So it's really important to follow each step because I'm going to start from the very beginning. Basically, I'm going to go through the fundamentals, not all the weeds on it, but really, Jason really laid the foundation, and we hear this a lot, but really it is the prerequisite to clash automation. So you can't really create any clash tests until you have a strong foundation. So I would really strongly recommend getting into the advanced search sets, take the level 2 certification. It goes really deep into how to create some powerful searches. And once you really lay that foundation, you really build the case for a really strong clash test that will really reduce the amount of false positives, which we don't really want to ever get. Neither do your subcontractors. You're making more work. Grouping in zones. This is a very powerful technology that helps us refine and filter data quickly. I kind of showed you what that grouping looks like. It'll compress basically thousands of clashes into a couple hundred. So it's less review time that you have to spend. And then we'll go into issue automation. Jason will speak about that. And this is the power of basically using a simple or an advanced automation feature. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a very simple test. This is actually looking at all the structure, including concrete and all the MEP systems. This is more an advanced workflow. But you can see you can do a simple one, which would be one model versus another, and assign everything to be. I'm showing you this one model, which is structural versus MEP and fire, using advanced automation. You could do category versus category, system versus systems. It just really depends on what you guys want to do. So you will set that up right here. You'll set the criteria right here in selection, give your test a name, and I do strongly recommend you use our clash labels because your company could easily create hundreds of tests, and you might want to only see the test that you created. So I'll give it a name called Matt's Clashes as an example. So here's the criteria. You can see, again, search set A is red, search sets B are in green, and I know the priority is structure. You can see I selected all my mechanical and electrical models. Give it a name. Okay, so there's a lot of different clash types. Revizto actually is extremely flexible. That's one of the best things about it. It's really as flexible as you want to create it, very versatile, and you can see the number of clash types we offer inside the program. 90% will probably be using hard clash, but I really like clearance clashes because it can actually imitate things that aren't even modeled, like fireproofing in this test. You can see we also have directly above and below as far as clearances, so now you don't have to model a ADA headroom clearance to run the accessibility clearances over your drive aisles, so that's a really good one. It's called directly above right here. And then there's tolerance clashes that you can set up as well. And when we get to the fire round, I'll show you some use cases of how to leverage some of these. So we're not going to be able to walk through every graphic here, but I'm just showing you what a hard clash versus a clearance clash might look like. So imagine that's a pipe and you want to imitate some insulation. You could put a clearance around that without having to model it. And as long as that clearance hits that element A, it would detect a clash. Hard clash, there is no clearance on it. It's just two objects touching each other. So a little bit about the workflow of what a clash automation might look like. Obviously, you're going to receive your model updates, hopefully on a weekly schedule. It uses our automated export scheduler, and then it'll push it into the clash automation. You will run it, and it'll automatically detect what clashes got resolved. It'll put those in the resolved category. Otherwise, it's going to show them as either open or new clashes, and then your job is obviously reviewing those. And obviously, if you use those powerful features like grouping and our issue automation, you're going to spend a lot less time. Actually, the filters and the grouping, you're going to spend a lot less time reviewing them. And the ones that you want to send to issue tracker, you'll use that issue automation, which then sends them to the issue tracker, and then it automatically updates the dashboards. Or if you want to export reports on a weekly basis to the design team or your subcontractors to remind them what's important, you can do that as well. Okay, so clash ignore rules. I do want to spend some time here because this is actually the best way to reduce the false positives. And we always put a tip down here, so you guys will get access to these slides so you can see the tips, but these are really important tips if you're trying to get the most out of Revizto. But when you spend enough time setting up your test properly and setting up these ignore rules, you're really going to reduce the amount of time you have to spend looking through what I call white noise, or the false positives. You don't want to have those. And you can see all the different types of rules you can create. You want to obviously ignore any duplicate overlapping geometry. And I would highly recommend you ignore all these because this is the metadata that's being brought in from Revit or your authoring software. which is invisible, but it actually is three-dimensional, so it would detect that as an object, so you do want to ignore that. And then obviously that we don't need to catch all the stuff like flex duct. Hangers, you might want to catch that, but right now, early on in the phase, I don't want to do that yet. I might do that in, like I said, a more micro test and just find hanger clashes. And that's at the tail end of coordination. And obviously, any tremble sleep points, I'm going to ignore that. Right here is actually where I want to spend most of the time on this slide, because there's going to be very specific conditions that you might want to create where you want one search set to make sure if it hits that search set in B, that you actually ignore it. So this one's a good example. Very commonly in construction especially, you're going to have a ton of clashes with your structural slabs. On a type 1 construction project, you're going to always have plumbing and mechanical risers rising right through the slab, and that would get caught as a clash. But you can actually tell Revizto that if you have these two specific search sets that are clashing, I want you to ignore that. And so that one's called right here, object A and object B, that are in specific different search sets. And you can add even more conditions if you want. Obviously, the vertical risers here in this example are going to get sleeves in the field, so we don't want to detect that. Grouping. So again, this is another very powerful workflow to really reduce the amount of clashes you need to review. And when you set up the auto grouping, when you run clash detection, it's automatically going to figure out if those clashing objects meet this criteria, it's going to constrain it to this criteria you set. So in this example, I'm going to actually look at system type B, which is mechanical or plumbing. It's going to look at it first by its system type. It's going to make sure it's looking at it just on that level that it's on. It's going to actually look at the zone it's in. And I'm going to set a proximity, a chain proximity of 25 feet. And then it's going to basically chain that up to a 100-foot max chain distance, which I'll show you in a bit what that looks like. And when you do that, it's automatically given it a group name right here. And you can move these up and down to adjust the name. But I'm just showing you what these are the groups that I think are the most helpful to get the most out of Revizto, but you can actually see there's a lot more things you can group it by. So grouping by proximity, there's two ways to do that. You can use a regular proximity, which is really looking at the distance that matches that group criteria and puts a distance in any clashes that it finds those objects in. Let's say at 25 feet, it's going to group that automatically, and then it'll find the next group within 25 feet. The one I was showing you earlier was a chain group or a chain proximity, which is pretty much the same as this one. The only difference is when there's another group that overlaps this group, it's going to chain it together up to a max chain size that you specify, which I would recommend up to 100 feet. Zones is really a great way to filter your data and really figure out what has the highest priority, for example. You can use that at a micro level or a macro level. In this example, it's more micro because you can see it's specifically looking at zones for service corridors, things above a ceiling, things that might be inside the unit, and you'll basically assign that a priority level to really figure out where's the most important issues that I actually want clash automation to detect. And then I'll use my filter to only look at the high priority or the service corridors. That's really good in the design phases of the project because you don't need to work out all the minutia yet. You can leave that to the contractor anyways to figure that lower priority hanging fruit. So that's one way you can use the zones. And those are just 3D elements that come from, let's say, Revit, and you just export that out as a model, and it brings it right into Revizto as a 3D object. Here's a macro zone. You can see this might be during construction where you're actually separating this project based on its sequencing. So maybe that's segment A and segment B, or zone 1 and 2, which is really built out on the phasing of the schedule. But this is looking at a lot less zones, for example, but I can filter that information based on what zone it's in. And you can kind of see there how it reduces the amount of clashes again to the number of groups. And then as you work down the criteria here, you'll see the metadata. This is actually automatically being brought in from your authoring software. And you can see when it does that, it allows you to filter by that data. So not only can you filter by level and zone, you might want to filter by grid intersection. what room is it in, what area, what space. So that's the metadata that's coming from the model authoring software. The last thing is the view settings. You want to definitely spend some time specifying what that clash group might look like when it gets sent to the issue tracker. But do you want that clash group to be put a section box to fit it to the clash, or do you want to constrain it to a level? That's what you would set up here. Assign what colors you want that clash to look like. And then this is a new feature that came out earlier last year. The default camera view of how to view that clash when it goes to issue tracker, what appearance profile or template you want that to have, and things like that. Once you do that, this is an example of what that might look like. You can see this has an appearance template applied. And then the last thing you'll see is you're going to map the issue automation. So this is how it automatically recognizes who the clash gets assigned to. And you can see, again, if you do it and set it up correctly, it'll assign that clash to the right trade or discipline. As you can see here, this is looks like a gravity line that's hitting the steel. And you can see it assign that to the plumber. And then using that proximity, you can see it reduced the clash count by 80%. So a lot less clash review time.
Issue automation. That's probably one of my most favorite things inside Revizto. There's two parts to issue automation. There's the simple issue automation, which works at the macro level. Clash A versus, selection A versus selection B is clashing. It needs to go to the structural engineer. So you can define the stamp, the priority, deadline, the assignee, the watches, the tags. And it's kind of designed to be that brute force, large scale overview. So you can say all these clashes in this clash test are going over here. Then there's the second component to issue automation, which is the advanced issue automation. And this is where it starts to get really cool. In my words, this is the sexy part of Revizto. When you build up your search sets, you spend some time building those frameworks and those methodologies. You then get to leverage it in the issue automation. Matt's been talking about doing a lot of clash reviews inside the clash automation. The clash automation window and pane inside Revizto is incredibly powerful. But I'm one of those people that like to go fishing or mountain biking. So I'd rather not sit there and look at clashes. I'd rather have the machine do the heavy lifting. And to do that, you need to rely on the advanced issue automation. You can define all of the same things: stamp, priority, deadline, the assignee, the watcher, and the tags. But the benefit of advanced issue automation is you can create algorithms and conditions. If pipe is bigger than 50 millimeters, make it a high priority thing. If pipe is passing through a firewall, send it to the fire engineer and escalate that. If pipe is vertical inside a wall, ignore it. Don't raise an issue. So you can use Revizto and really empower your workflows with Revizto in here to do some of the thinking when you're reviewing the clashes itself. And that way you can use that really awesome feature inside Clash Automation, which is run clash detection and sync with issue tracker. That one button that does it all. And if you've been to the exhibit hall and if you've checked out our new scheduler improvements, you'll notice that the clash detection component is now part of the scheduler. So now you can schedule the upload of the models and schedule the clash detection, and you can choose the option to sync with issue tracker. So you can do all of that while you're fishing or mountain biking.
And then we're going to have to wrap up here pretty fast. So I'm going to close with issue management. This is the last step. So once you ran the clash automation, it's going to sync it to the issue tracker. This is really enabling your team. So you're doing really the management side to kind of figure out what issues are really the main priority issues that need to be discussed, let's say in your construction coordination or design review meetings. And you're going to use filter preset in our chat feed here. I love the issue tracker. You can see it has 4 panels in here. You got your chat feed, you got your issues, and then the presets. I want to spend some time here on presets. This is the way to organize and keep things nice and tidy in Revizto. And the way I like to look at it is you got your out-of-the-box presets that come with Revizto as soon as you make a project. But the custom filters right here is what you really want to leverage. What I like to do is I like to figure out what design issues are related to constraining my project that'll hold up coordination. So I'll make very specific filter presets so the design team knows what they need to work on. Or I might bring this either up in a report and bring it up in the OAC meetings as an example. Clash, you can see very simple, just looking at all the clash issues, and if you want to figure out who's it's assigned to, just go into custom filter and click on assignee or company. I do like to look at things as a constructability issue during my coordination meetings. You can see it's broken out by scope of work or trade, and then I might want to create some presets specifically for the field. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the sorting and filtering inside of Clash automation. So you can see here, you can sort. If you just click on the headers right up here, you can sort by a number of criteria you can see here on the left. I do like to sort by level first, and then by clash count, so I can see where the most clashes are occurring. Same thing would apply with the filter presets or the filter by. That's the metadata it's looking at right here, and you can just click on more and add even more filters. But you can see I normally want to filter really on what's coming up on my deadlines. So if I got a ground level pour date in 1 month, the first thing I'm going to do is, after I run clash automation, is filter to the ground level clashes. And then I'm going to figure out what zone is that pour date coming up, let's say in a month. So that way my issues are getting sent to the right detailers. So they need to close those out, obviously, as quickly as possible to meet those deadlines. Once you do that, you can see here, again, it's reducing 285 clashes down to, it looks like 28 groups. And then it assigns it a stamp. Another cool feature right here is just searching for it. So you don't have to just use filters. You can just type the word that you're looking to find the clashes with and just type in ductwork, and you can see it's going to filter it, again, down to just looks like a handful of groups there. And then this is just a kind of a animation that's kind of showing you what that might look like. You can see here I'm filtering by level first. Again, it's reducing that number down here if you look at it. Now I'm filtering by zone. Again, reducing that number right here. Then I might want to click on a particular group. Again, it's cropping it. And then I can itemize it and see exactly what clash there is right here. So very easy to filter data. Then reports and dashboards. So after you've done all that, you can really now sit back, hopefully on an island somewhere, and kind of manage that process and see like that the clash counts are going down. You can see this is just looking at the amount of clashes, let's say, or issues by company, or what the workflow is looking like from 1 week, how many issues are getting closed or solved.
Just before you skip, I particularly like the timeline chart. And how many people are using the timeline chart? Oh, that's really good. That was my favorite one. I used to have conversations with project managers that in the beginning of the project, we expect the line going up. In the middle of the project, we expect the line to flatten off. And towards the end of the project, we expect the line to go down. A true story, I was working on a project where a client made a late change and the line was going up and it went flat. And in the phase that it was going down, they made a change, the client-driven change, and then the line went up. And the report went out automatically, 9 a.m. Monday morning. 9:05, I get a call from the project manager and I'm like, oh man, I wonder what he's seen in the report. And he's like, hey, the line's going up. And I'm like, yeah, it's going up. And he goes, why is it going up? And I said, remember 2 weeks ago we had a DTM, a design team meeting, and the client instructed a big change? And he goes, yeah. This is the impact on the coordination of your project because of that change. He's like, oh, so it's a good idea if we give the design team more time to finish the coordination then? I was like, yeah. And the line went down again.
Some more dashboards. You can get really clever with these dashboards, but here you can see it's looking at, looks like the issues by assignee. And I like to create ones for clashes. I like to separate clashes from constructability issues. This is really important because I really just want to focus on really constructability and design. I let the subcontractors typically look at this at the beginning of a meeting, but they really need to close that out outside the meeting, so your meetings are really concise. This is looking at more of a tree map. You can kind of see the proportions of who has clashes. You can see Alex Gomez has a lot of issues he needs to work on, so he needs to get on that. And then you got your reports. Again, you could break that out into design constraint issues and send that to your architect or design team, or bringing it up into an OAC meeting. And then you got your trade clashes reports or trade constructability issues. I like to have those separated out and sent on a schedule. So that might get sent, at every Monday at 8 o'clock. So
Hey, we made it rapid fire.
we got 5
We
more
got 5 minutes.
Yes. So yeah, very exciting to get into the rapid fire. So this might include a lot of stuff that is really just helpful to know. It's not necessarily related to clash automation. So if you guys haven't used this, and I did actually go to a presentation this morning, and they highly raved about this feature here. It's the temporary object move. It came out earlier last year. And I'm just kind of showing you a quick animation of what that looks like. A lot of Navisworks users love this, by the way, so we are listening to the feedback.
I had a customer say that we need to include this in AR.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Was that a big oh yeah from the audience? All right, I'll note that.
Yeah, so being able to temporarily move something on the fly during your coordination meetings, super helpful. And then fixing it in Revit and then pushing it right back. Here's the same thing, but now you can actually adjust the temporary object move on a custom axis. So you could see down here, actually, you could see the orientation of my project is right here, and this uses shared coordinates. So it is looking at true north as straight up, but you can see I have my project's at a slight angle to true north. With the custom axis, you're going to actually specify a custom axis by just clicking on a surface perpendicular to it. So all I need to do is select the object I'm trying to temporarily move, click on a surface down here that's perpendicular, and you can see in the next slide what it does. It allows me to move that object in the orientation I want it to go. Super helpful. This is just showing you some test examples now that I walked you through the clash setup. These are some of the tests that you can run. This would be a point cloud clash test. So you can see this does issue automation as well, A and B. A is the structure, B is the plumbing, and you can see it's mapped to plumbing in the issue automation. I love these examples. So I told you at the beginning, there's a lot of different types of tests. This is a clearance clash type test, looking at elements directly above a specified amount of feet. So you can see the building code is going to say your stair have to be 6'8" clear. Nothing can be below that 6'8". You could just run that script, and issue automation would find any objects that are in that zone that's below 6'8". As you can see here, I got a pipe right over my landing. Same thing would apply with your drive aisle clearances. You don't have to model a fake ceiling to imitate the 8'2". You can just let Revizto do the work for you and just put in the specified 8'2", and it'll run it and find, you can see the ducts here that are below 8'2". This is a test actually on, looks like using clearances again. And this is an interesting one that sometimes we don't think about, but it's just having mechanical run a clearance against my sprinkler heads. Sprinkler heads, as you can see, might have a 12-foot clearance that it needs to be clear of. And when you do that, you can see, again, issue automation. It does all the work. And then again, you can map that to assign that to mechanical to move that diffuser to make sure it's clear by 12 inches. This one actually is showing you how the issue automation works when you map it correctly. You can see this test is a plumbing gravity line against mechanical ductwork. Now, plumbing gravity lines, in my opinion, are higher priority items because it's very specific to the slope, which is defined by the code. But you can see it actually assigned it correctly to mechanical to move that clash. You didn't actually have to do that. Here's another example where you might have a typical clash test where mechanical is running against MEP. And so normally all the trades in the MEP will get the issue assigned to them. But there could be cases where you might have a duct hit and switch gear. Okay, so normally it would actually go to mechanical or electrical if those two objects are touching. But in this case, you can see it's actually going to assign that clash actually to mechanical. So you can basically say what's high priority.
We're getting the time.
All right.
We've got a ton of content in this slide deck. It'll be shared. I'd encourage you to reach out to Matt and I for questions in the breakout sessions in lunch. There's a whole wealth of knowledge in this slide deck, so do download it, do reach out. We want to share, but we knew it was going to be a tough order in 45 minutes, so thank you.